Where do you think the African Union now stands? Of course, the president gave up his power under Article 147 after the African Union made it clear that no sitting head of state should appear before the International Criminal Court. How do you think they perceive what he did?
Well, I think first, the African Union has rallied around Kenya.
Always.
It has rallied around Uhuru Kenyatta. And the reason for that is not merely because of some sort of cynical self-interest. It is because a line has to be held. This African Union is the African Union of Kwame Nkrumah, of Jomo Kenyatta, of Abdel Nasser. This is an African Union for 50 years that has been so aware that the sovereignty of Africa has been compromised from almost the time we got independence. And so the African Union today, my sense, is that they're looking on this first in an outraged way, because they made a very specific request. And they made that request as the largest bloc of countries. They made that request as the bloc of countries without which the ICC would not exist. But they were not listened to, they were not respected. And this, again, is something I'm sure the African Union is going to take up very forcefully. But that is to anticipate what will happen. But that is my suspicion.
That is your suspicion. That is to anticipate what could probably happen. From where you stand, like you said, they made a specific request. It was turned down. This is probably the sovereignty of Africa on the line. Do you probably think that they will make good the threat? Because at some point, African Union said they will pull out of the ICC.
Linda, Africa is rising. Africa is rising. And it is rising with Kenya at the front of that rising. And when you're rising, there are those who try and compromise your rising. Now, this is not just an issue that's affecting Africa. It's actually a global issue.
This is a power play from where you stand.
Yes, but we signed on to the Rome Statute.
Yes.
We didn't go there in a doubtful way. We didn't go with a half measure. We are a founding member of that court.
Yeah, and if I recall the state address by the president, he said, we enthusiastically signed into.
That's right. We even resisted countries that came here to Nairobi and told us to make their people immune if they're on our soil. We refused that. Now, for us, we did that knowing that we wanted a level playing field. We wanted a global system that has the same set of rules. Unfortunately, that's not what has happened over the last few years. What we have seen is partiality. What we have seen is a focus on Africans. What we have seen is an attempt to use Kenya to advance a particular brand of international domination. And so we do not want to be part of that agenda. And that is a big reason that Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta refused to step into that court as president.
So you're buying into this school of thought that the ICC is, quote unquote, an African court?
In a decade of existence, all the situations that have been investigated and prosecuted have been African. This is not a matter of my opinion. This is a matter of fact. Now, Linda, the thing I think a lot of viewers need to know, when we talk about justice, at the end, at the bottom of justice is a concept of fairness.
Yes.
And fairness is not partial. And so this court, no matter its legal trappings, ultimately its success must be based on fairness. And there is no fairness when you take Kenya and when you take Africa and you leave out the rest of the world. Just look at your news. Look at the wars. Look at the injustices. Look at the hundreds of thousands of people who've been murdered since the Kenyan situation started at the ICC. Why are they not subject to this international justice? Why is it us who are subject to this international justice? And what's worse, why would this international justice come to Kenya with such weak cases, with such shoddy work? Right?
It's you're saying the International Criminal Court came to Kenya with such weak cases, with such weak evidence and everything. So in your view, from where we stand, the prosecutors made it very clear, I do not have sufficient evidence to prosecute this case. You have a scenario where witnesses are pulling out, they're recanting their statement. What would be the correct thing to do from looking at everything that has happened up to now?
Well, first, what I've just said also has the judges themselves. There have been judges over the last few years who have criticized the prosecution for a shoddy investigation, and for an investigation that in fact should never even have reached the trial, gone through the pre-trial phase. Now what should happen? What should happen is that the international community needs to rally to improve this court. We need to help this court so that never again will there be a prosecution like this, never again will there be this kind of partiality. That is a commitment Kenya has, and that is what we're going to be pursuing. The other thing that needs to happen, really, is we need to talk about the victims.
Yes.
There has been a sense, somehow, that the victims are not in the mind of the government. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Are they?
If you're going to give the victims justice, you first have to start with picking on the right people. Second, you have to build a strong case. Third, you have to prosecute it properly, right? So what we have seen has not been for the victims. It has actually been a travesty against the victims. What the Office of the Prosecutor needed to do, if indeed it was going to act for the benefit of victims, is actually to put together proper cases against the correct people. Now, the issue of victims, I need to talk about that because I feel that the pain Kenyans went through in 2008, Kenyans are wondering, how do we actually get through this?
No, how do we get justice for the victims of 2007 post-election violence? Because, truth be told, atrocities were committed, lives were lost, property destroyed. Up to now, only one person has been convicted of those atrocities. So what happens to the rest of the people who did certain things in certain areas? Some of them are actually known. Nothing is happening.
No, Linda, you cannot say nothing is happening. From the coalition government, which contained both today's opposition and government,